And we are back. Welcome, everyone, to Founder Insights podcast by Animoca Brands. I'm Rich Robinson, entrepreneur in residence at Animoca Brands. And please, I'm going to get it out of the way right from the beginning, but I'm going to bug you along the way. Let's do CLS, comment, like, subscribe, please. Let's get the show started, shall we? We have a kick-ass entrepreneur from one of my favorite countries in the world for many, many reasons. He is the co-founder and CEO of PyratzLabs. As if that name isn't awesome enough, we're going to dive deep into his journey on the open seas and battling and all of the adventures along the way. Please welcome to the pod, Bilal El Alamy.
Hey, Richard. Hey, listeners. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited.
That's great. I'm also going to say, we'll put it in the show notes too, that this fine gentleman has his own PyratzLab podcast. I recommend it, especially if you're a native French speaker. Some really kick-ass, juicy stuff in French in the ecosystem. Let's deep dive.
Yeah, just like you, I try to give the mic to builders, investors, entrepreneurs in the French ecosystem to show the variety of the project, but also so that those entrepreneurs can share their insight and their entrepreneurship journey to really federate the French ecosystem.
Beautiful. The ultimate adventurers, the ultimate warriors, I truly believe these days are entrepreneurs going out and doing battle and being completely without a net and pushing themselves to the edge of their humanity. I love to cheerlead and amplify, like you said, give them the megaphone to talk about their journey along the way and give other listeners comfort that, hey, it's supposed to suck. It's supposed to be difficult along the way. It's not as sexy as the Instagrammers and everybody else make it. It's a grind, but it's a very worthwhile grind. So talk to us about your worthwhile grind, please, PyratzLabs.
Well, PyratzLab, I mean, I've been an entrepreneur for the past 6 years. Maybe we'll get back on the past, but to introduce quickly PyratzLab, the idea is to act as an enabler for the Web3 ecosystem in France and in Europe more extensively. What does that mean, being a Web3 enabler? It means that we have to put in place the tools and support for the ecosystem to grow, both technologically but also culturally. And we really believe, it starts by having a physical place. We have 1,000 meters square of office in Paris where we can federate and animate the ecosystem. And within PyratzLab, we branded it as an incubator. Within this incubator, we have 3 different programs. The first one is the studio program. That's where DOGAMI and other portfolio companies of Animoca came by. We can discuss about that later on. We have an accelerator program, quite classical, like Y Combinator, where we do different batch on different thematics, and we try to support entrepreneurs, external entrepreneurs from PyratzLab. And we have a corporate venture building program. This is very interesting because I really believe, I believe 2 things. I believe that so far, Web3 has been quite a niche subject. Only, people that understand the culture, the philosophy have been working in the space. And the idea is, how can we get the space to the next level? And I think the space needs to get to the next level by leveraging the corporates. The corporates, they have massive assets that you can use. They have massive customer base that they can use. And if we want to, unsilo the Web3 ecosystem and make it a tech ecosystem, a subdivision of the tech ecosystem, it needs to be like normalized. And normalization goes by those big corporates that will vet the technology, the use cases. So we made it quite our priority for the next 2 years to develop those corporate relationships. And our model is very simple. The initial hypothesis is that corporates are struggling to innovate. They're failing most of their innovation projects, and they end up doing some big M&A operation to buy companies at a very high price to create new growth, a new growth candle. And what we tell them is that, you know what, if there is a company or a subject or a use case that you like, let's do a joint venture. So we create a company where we are both investors, the corporate and PyratzLab, and we're going to build this company. And in 3 years, once the company has grown, first you will make it grow by sharing your customer base, and you will capture the value as you're a shareholder of this commercial partnership. And two, once you want to buy this company, you don't have to buy 100% of the company, but only 20-25% that we own. So it's kind of a nice approach to mitigate the risk, both from an entrepreneurship standpoint on our side and also from an innovation standpoint from the corporate side.
I love that. Fantastic. That's new ground to dig into. And I have experience in that in China. As you said, you're a startup. You don't have any brand recognition. You don't have any resources. You don't have any users. But hey, look at that big corporation. Everybody knows their name. They're really drowning in resources and they have a huge customer base. Let's put that together. But here's the thing is that usually it's kind of like doing an organ transplant where it rejects it. So you need that kind of like cartilage in between, and that's you guys to and cartilage is not cartilage is tough. Cartilage is getting crunched in between two things, but it makes them work together in a smooth way that's effective. So I'm a big believer in that, and I think there needs to be more of that done. And that's a way to accelerate things in Web3, not just tapping into Web2, but tapping into where so many users are, which is really even bigger picture than Web2, which is all of the corporates around the world.
Exactly. So that's what we really believe is the next leverage to create positive externalities and get the whole Web3 ecosystem to the next stage, meaning in terms of user adoption, in terms of awareness, in terms of less bad press, since when the corporates will accept, embrace that technology, there will be less bad press. And so we need all of that to really grow the ecosystem in the next 5, 10, 15 years.
Beautiful. How do you say positive externalities in French?
Des externalités positive. It's like the same.
Wow. So it's close. It's close. I was like, those are good. That's a good combination of words. I wonder if it's the same
background in consulting.
Right? Yes. Nicely done. So there's three other things that I want to peel back and go deeper. One is about the other two channels you talked about. You talked about the Accelerator and also the studio/incubator. But let's go bigger picture first. Let's talk about the deliciousness that you're building in one of the most delicious places in the world. I've eaten my way through your country so many times. Let's talk about France. People think of Europe, they think Berlin, or they think maybe Sweden, Unicorn Factory, or they think UK. But France is a really dynamic tech ecosystem, and it has been for a long time. Minitel, the pin and chip, and and especially on Web3, there's a crazy awesome French mafia in Web3. It's amazing.
Yeah. So, the first fact is that I think, many countries have that, but in France, most specifically, we have amazing engineering and business school. So we have amazing talents. And I really believe that COVID is part of the reason of that, is that before those talents were going abroad. And because of COVID, everybody came back to France and stayed in France. And so it captured the talent base, and the company in France leveraged that. So that's kind of the first, my lecture of one of the first reasons. The second one, I like to quote Yatsu on that. France is a revolutionary country. Web3 redistribute the cards. And I think philosophically, we're very close also from those values. A third reason is that in terms of entrepreneurship, it's one of the best countries to be an entrepreneur in. Why? Because you can create a company in 24 hours with €1. You can open a bank account in the next 24 hours. You have the French public investment banks who supports the innovation with a lot of grants to those startups. They double down your fundraisings sometimes. And when you're doing something that is technological, you don't pay taxes on the employees. So basically, it's very attractive kickstart the company there. Obviously, after, France is known to have a lot of taxes, but that's a rich problem. In the beginning, you have to start, have the right partner, the right talents, the right channel for funding, and I think France is very hot. A fourth reason why the Web3 ecosystem is thriving in France is that I think the regulatory powers, the governments have been very proactive on those topics and tried to create frameworks, or at least do a lot of reports to explain the risk and how you can structure this or this operation. And so it created a lot of trust from the Web3 players to come and install themselves in France. Obviously, Sorare is well known. Sandbox, another portfolio company of Animoca, is based in Paris. I see Seb every month, and he does
Life Beyond. Sandbox is the
Exactly.
pixelated version of the metaverse. Life Beyond is cinematic version. Both French entrepreneurs. Like, wow.
Exactly. And so this helped attract bigger company like Binance, who set up there and went for the crypto asset license, crypto.com, and all those players that want to join the European ecosystem.
Fantastic. I can't wait to get back and visit. I lived 5 years in Europe.
And also, we have good food, like you said, and we have Paris. I mean,
The lifestyle, the history, the culture, the food, check, all the way down.
No, it's really amazing to be an entrepreneur here.
Is pretty solid. Let's talk about the studio, if you want to call it that, or incubator.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of that model. There's actually an entrepreneur who's also happens to be French, Fabrice Grinda, and founder of FJ and he's had his studio. They're an investor in Animoca Brands and also a co-investor. And he talked about that studio model, how it's something where it can really bear fruit if it's done right.
Yeah. Well, it's a very complex model because first, it's not for everyone. Very humbly, I am hyperactive. I work like 100 hours a week. I love to do that. I love to be in contact of the entrepreneurs. I love to hack problems. I love the energy in this pre-seed stage where you have to, hack the problem, hack the positioning, hack the business model, hack the talents acquisition, hack the business acquisition. And I just love this energy. And so I think the venture studio, the startup studio model fits really well with my personality. And you need this first of personality to be able to sustain it. Then it's very complex because as a repeated entrepreneurs, you become more and more involved in many projects. And as an entrepreneur, you have to really know how to compartmentalize, how to focus on those subjects and switch from one day to the other. Then what I love about the studio program, once you have those requirements of having someone like me, basically, it's very exciting because you're very close to the company. It's not like an accelerator or an investor where you just invest and you do a couple of intros or you help the fundraising. You're really hands-on. I work for the companies. Like I worked for DOGAMI, that was the first portfolio companies. Then indeed, it's not really scalable because when I start a company and I launched the product and I raised funds, I have a shareholder agreement, I have exclusivity, I cannot like paralyze that much the company creation. And so I'm very dedicated to the company for 1 year to 18 months. And once it do a proper fundraising, I'm able to basically lever my exclusivity and hire more internal people and make sure the knowledge transfer is done. And then since it's still a little bit my baby, I'm still very involved, always connect. A person in my position is central to the ecosystem. So I have a 360 degrees information gathering. And so it's very, it helps a lot all the other companies because I can connect the dots easily. And being exposed to such a high bandwidth of information really allows me to be very targeted in my advisory, in all the operational action that I take. And so it's a win-win. It's a win-win for the company and the other co-founders, and for me, and for PyratzLabs, which I represent. And again, needs to find the right balance in the equity so that it's fair for everyone in the long term. So very complex, but indeed, the returns are much higher. because you come in really early, you have a lot of shares at nominal value, and so the multiples can just become crazy.
Fantastic. Yeah. Fabrice now has a child and he's dialed back from that, but he had a similar involvement level. And I look at somebody like your good self, also Yat. Yat has a similar background, similar energy, similar superpowers, able to switch contexts, do that context switching over and over to be able to have these, cycles that are really sped up. And that's a superpower. There's very few people like that on planet Earth, but that's a amazing way to, you kind of like,
It's different kind of personality.
just like you shine your light and then they shine their light.
Exactly, and I really take a lot of pleasure in valorizing or make people very humbly again, help people. Because there also it's entrepreneurship. We start from nothing. There are a lot of links that are created, human links, empathy between the founders and the team member, and being very invested. Everybody sees it, and it's just multiplied the loyalty and the dedication of the other team members. And just as a reference, I'm really good at being 100% on many projects, but I'm really bad at being 20% on one project because I got bored, because my head drifts, and so I need to be 100% and switch the topics. And it's this excitement that allows me to be at 100%. Otherwise, I wouldn't be at 100%, and I would be very bad. And basically, I sold my first company, the fintech company, because I was getting bored of managing, 15, 20 people doing the same thing all the day. And so weirdly, the companies decreased the growth 2 years after the product market fit, whether 1 year after the product market fit, because I was less invested. And so I decided to sell this company so that it can take a new inertia and focus on a model that better fit my personality.
Love it. Let's dive deep, double click on the Accelerator and what you've been doing there and how many cohorts you've had and what's exciting for you there.
So in the Accelerator, so in the beginning, we were not short-sighted, but we were focused on the studio, and I spent the first year and a half at DOGAMI, the video games that try to remake Tamagotchi, and we've seen that we made so much connections in terms of investors, in terms of potential partners in the ecosystem, in this gaming vertical, that we said, wait, we need to mutualize this knowledge, these connections with the rest of the ecosystem. So we created this Accelerator program so that we can help external entrepreneurs access our expertise in tech, access our partners and investors, and have the experience sharing of other entrepreneurs that have done it before them. And so we created this acceleration program. It's a little bit like Y Combinator. We take between 2 and 7% at nominal value, depending on the advancement of the project, on the founder's background, etc. And then we invest 200K tickets into the company. And we try to federate other investors with us so that we reach at least a pre-seed of 500 to 1 million euro. And then we accelerate the company. And within the acceleration, we support the companies not only on advisory and investor network, but like I was saying, we work for this company. And we work on 3 topics. We work mainly on the technology because we all have a tech background. We've shipped a lot of projects, or I've seen a lot of projects being shipped and a lot of mistakes being done. So we try to share the best practices on the technology, even sharing resources. We help also on the marketing, on the go-to-market, because it's very important to maximize the impact when you launch to create the right traction to attract the investors. And finally, as an entrepreneur, I've seen that founders lose a lot of time on HR, legal, financial topics. It's maybe 30% of the time. And when it's their first company, they don't know how to handle those processes.
It could take even longer if it's their first company, right? It's just
Exactly.
a whole new set of muscles, and it's not core to their business, right?
So we created dedicated departments within PyratzLabs that we call CFO as a service, and which regroup HR, legal, finance, and all the portfolio companies use this service, and we mutualize the resources of this service among all the other companies. So we reuse the templates of hiring, the templates of fundraising, the framework of financial management and treasury management, and we put in place that for the company. So within PyratzLabs, there is a girl that is the HR manager and does all the pays for all the portfolio companies, basically, for example. And this allows the founders to have those 30% buffer, minimum buffer, to allocate them in the product development, in the business development, where the real value is created. So we, like I was saying, the vision is to put in place the tools and support for the ecosystem to grow. That's the put in place the right supports that the entrepreneurs need. Helps that.
Beautiful. Just like you said with the studio, it's all about building the product and getting to product market fit, and then starting to focus on growth. And you kind of step out when that happens. And that's what it should be all about. Like, I know some of you listening, it's fun to go to conferences and you got to get the word out there. You can't just be completely a hermit on your own, but you have to focus on product as the founder as much time as you can to be able to get that to that product market fit. Otherwise, there's no party at all.
And like Steve Jobs was saying, don't hesitate to ask for help. You know, the entrepreneur, when they start, they're really crispated by the equity. They think equity is only something that goes down for them because the dilution will only decrease their equity participation. But there are two things that are extremely wrong with that. The first one is that it's false. You have stock options that you can reallocate to keep or top up your stakeholding throughout time if you succeed on specific milestone. So the interests are aligned, and equity is not just something that goes down. And the second thing is that a lot of entrepreneurs are not humble enough with their idea, and they think, oh, they're the only one to have the idea. Oh, they don't want to share information, whatever. They don't want to share equity. But I can challenge anyone to go ask one of our portfolio companies and see if they don't think Pirates was cornerstone in their launch or their success. And that's because it's very evident. You leverage an existing experience, best practices, network, investors. So yeah, when you come here, you have more chance of delivering your product faster and attracting investors faster. It's just a no-brainer.
Fantastic. Let's talk about DOGAMI. I've met the team there. I'm really excited about that. I think that whole pet category has been done over and over and over again, but every time there's a new paradigm, that's when it needs to be innovated on. You don't have to create something completely new, but I remember the, Tamagotchi from way back in the day when it was like, before things even went on phones. It was a little egg on your keychain, and I think it's a terrific tip of the spear to get into it, and it's something that's perfectly suited to be on chain and that connection. And tell us as much about that as you can, please.
Yeah, of course. So, well, the original idea was very naive. We said, what could be the right use cases for Web3? And gaming has pretty straightforward advantages for the gamers. The fact that there is unicity and scarcity that can be verified is something very interesting. And when you interact with animals, every animal is unique. They don't do the same size, they don't have the same eye, they don't have the same mouth form. And so we wanted to use this value proposition in the Tamagotchi-like game because it increased the empathy that you have with your playable character, because it's unique, it's yours, like a real dog, like a real animal that you nurture. The other value proposition of being able to monetize your time in game are interesting, but I don't want too much to get into it because the main idea of games is to take pleasure. And I think when you stop playing the game, the least you could do is to easily resell your assets. And that's been done for 20 years in the gaming market, reselling games. So it's just the normal continuity to be able to sell your assets in the game as well as the game. And so that those value propositions were very interesting. very straightforward in gaming. And the Tamagotchi like was the gaming mechanic that was able to showcase those value proposition easily through the empathy that you create with the dog. And as much as you take care of the dog, you get rewarded for that, and your dog and with those rewards you can improve your dog, which makes sense because when you train your dog, he improves his faculties. So that was kind of the very naive original idea. Then we were lucky to get a little bit of success, awareness in the ecosystem, a big community. And so we enlarged the scope of what we were building. And we said, okay, what we are doing actually is to create an entertainment brand that is digital Web3 native. So let's build up on that and create more games where you can reuse the same assets within this ecosystem of games. So the first game was a Tamagotchi-like game. The second game is a racing game, because in our original vision, we wanted to have a phase one where it's Tamagotchi, and then a series of games where once your offspring becomes an adult, you can have him take a job career. So the first job career is a racing driver. And so they'll be able to be a racing driver in this racing game. I love motorsport as well, so that was quite one of the reasons as well. But the idea was is to create a lot of different games where you can use your adult dog in those games and have fun with the rest of the community.
I love that. Anything you can share about the status of that community, some of the size and engagement?
Yeah, of course. So yeah, we have about 100,000 community members on Twitter. I don't add up all the social networks, but on Twitter, that's kind of the reference. We released one game a little bit less than a year ago. Within this game, it's played in 120 countries by 60% of the holders. And what we are doing is we've been building a second game that will be released in October or November, which is this racing game. And it's more competitive because the first game was single player. This game is multiplayer, and it's so more competitive, and people will be able to interact against themselves. Last week, we've done the first playtest of this new game. We had exciting feedbacks from the community that love it, that found it very fun, very addictive, and love the interaction and the competitiveness that from the game. So we're definitely expecting a lot from this release. And on top of that, we've been obviously trying to partner with other brands, projects. So we partner with Gap to do a fashion suit of assets within the game. Then we issued in the real world a hoodie that is a Gap, a collaboration between Cap and DOGAMI
Awesome.
hoodie. In the gaming space, we've partnered with Sandbox. So we have a community gathering place in the Sandbox. We're doing a bridge where you can bridge your DOGAMI NFT to a voxelized DOGAMI so that you can walk around the Sandbox. So yeah, trying to connect to the ecosystem because interoperability is one of the value proposition of Web3 gaming. And so we want to go towards that.
Excellent. Really leveraging not just the metaverse, but the multiverse, bringing in the Gap. That's terrific. Are there any other companies from the studio that you'd like to highlight as well?
Well, right now, for the past 6-9 months, since DOGAMI raised its Series A, and I was able to lever my exclusivity and get back to PyratzLabs. First, I want to justify on that typically. So, like I was saying, first, what I like to do and where I'm good is in this pre-seed stage, where you have to act the model, build the product, etc. And in the case of DOGAMI, originally, blockchain was cornerstone to the production of the game, but then the company becomes a video game company. We're building video games. And originally I was the CTO of DOGAMI because of my tech background, not because of my gaming background. So it made only sense that once we get to a certain stage, I step down because I'm not the right guy to manage a gaming company. And so, since this last fundraising in November, I went back on a new project within the studio, which is this time a DeFi project, because my background was in finance, quantitative finance. My first company was a fintech company, and basically I was doing a lot of stuff in DeFi, whether it is linked to NFTs or fungible tokens. And what I've seen is that um, I suffered a huge liquidation on Aave, and I lost 40% of my money. And so I was like, what the fuck? How could this happen? Tried to dig into it to understand what was the problem. And I saw that the way Aave is managing the collateral is not very thorough. What does it mean? It means that when the collateral price moved by 20%, there are hundreds of millions that are liquidated. And so I'm like, wow, that's not really stable. I mean, you cannot expect Morgan Stanley to come and bring money in DeFi if they can be liquidated in a blink of an eye. So how can we build a money market, a lending protocol that can support more stability in the collateral management? So that was kind of the original idea from something that I lived and where I lost money. And so I started building a team. And a lot of people, when we talk about PyratzLabs, they're like, yeah, but how do you choose the ideas? How do you choose the project you want to focus on, the startup studio? I say, you know what? Ideas are ideas. The company sediments once the idea intersects with the right people. So actually, I have like 10 ideas that I'm testing here and then, talking with people in consulting firms to see if they like it, people in luxury to see if they like it, etc. But there's only once there is this intersection of people and idea that the company materialize. And within the past 9 months, it materialized in this project called SecردLab, where we are trying to build lending protocols that are more stable for the user participants of this protocol. There is another value proposition that we are trying to push within this protocol is that today there is a huge conflict of interest in DeFi. The conflict of interest is between the token holders that governs the parameters of the lending protocol and the users of those lending protocols. They're not necessarily the same.
Can you give an example?
Yeah, for example, on Aave, it's the governance, the people that are the token holders that decide on the interest rates model that needs to be used, that decide on the liquidation threshold that they should imply. But I don't want to, as a lender, I don't want to loan my money and have other people decide how this money should be reimbursed. So we believe the governance of lending protocols should be in the hand of the lenders, not the token holders. And so we created this protocol that is more stable to minimize the liquidation and gives governance to the token holders. Tomorrow, Morgan Stanley, when they come into DeFi, they want to implement their own interest rate model. They want to integrate their own liquidation models. They don't want someone else to decide for them that. And we want to build this lending protocol that can support those institutional when they come into DeFi. And also retails, because I was a retail participating in this lending protocol. I deposited money, I got liquidated. I was like, what? I didn't do shit. So we want.
So this is personal. This is really resonates with you. So it's a beautiful way to start a company.
Of course. I mean, I wouldn't start a company if it doesn't resonate on me, if I don't feel it, in my gut.
Maybe not you, but other people make that mistake because there are those days where you wake up and you're like, I don't want to get out of bed. But if you're feeling something intrinsic in your bones in it, then that's what pulls you
Exactly.
out of bed and into it. So you got to feel it. So it's beautiful that you shared that. Thank you.
Exactly. So in the studio, we do one company every year and a half. Try to be very focused. Also, DeFi is very complex. It took us a year to have the right team, to build the right models, to build the right architecture. It's not.
But you have that experience in fintech. Tell us about your background and your entrepreneurial journey over the last 6 years, please.
I used to be a French scientist, graduated in math and physics. A little bit worked in quantitative finance. Then I did an MBA. After my MBA, I went quite the traditional business school path. Worked in investment banking at Rothschild. Worked in consulting at Accenture. And I was always passionate about entrepreneurship. And when I was working at Rothschild, I've seen some limitation in the way private equity funds were managing their back office and middle office. So I created a company called EquiSafe that basically is a financial reporting tool for investment funds and investment companies that handles also the compliance and the brokerage. And the software company, which is also a broker dealer, then I've been managing it since 2019 until 2018 until 2021, when I basically created PyratzLab. And yeah, when it got its product market fit, I was way less excited on it. It was a very regulated company, so I was going to the financial market regulators every 2 months, and I felt, a little bit imprisoned at some point. And so I decided to sell the company, and the process is almost done. And basically, I could now fully dedicate my focus on PyratzLab and how to help the ecosystem grow, and share a little bit of my energy, share a little bit of my experience and the experience of the people that surrounds me. Because, sometimes people attribute to me some of the successes, but to be honest, I cannot imagine being able to do everything I did without the people that are with me. So I want to say a special word for people like
Yes.
Uda, my COO, Peyao, my CMO, Thomas, my co-founder and the CTO, the technical lead of
Shout out.
PyratzLab.
Yes.
And really, without them, it wouldn't be possible. So find your right nakama, your right team, and anything is possible once you have it.
Love it. And thank you for being so authentic about how you felt imprisoned. I've heard this story of being an entrepreneur, you're kind of in the jungle and it's so thick that you can't even see where the sun is, and you have to fight your way out. There's quicksand and poisonous snakes, and you get out of that stage, and then you see a muddy path and you slog along the muddy path, and then you see a dirt road, and then you start walking fast on the dirt road, and then you see a paved road, and then you see the freeway, and then you see a runway, and you can fly up into the sky.
And this could
You
be
like to
interesting.
go back into the jungle after that
Exactly.
because you prefer not to be doing the smooth same thing. You want to be fighting for your life, finding product market fit out of the jungle.
Exactly. It's just so thrilling to get outside of your comfort zone, and really it shows you your capabilities of finding solutions. And that's really what drives me. I think it's like problem solving. When there is a problem, even when you're having a coffee and we don't agree on something. Okay, we're going to spend the next 30 minutes arguing about that because I want to understand why you think differently than me. I want to give you my perspective and see if we can change your mind or my mind. So problem solving is at the core. And I wanted to add something, but I forgot. I forgot.
Yeah, I love you talked about having a coffee. Like, talk to us about your sources of energy. You have an energy you can
Exactly.
feel. Is that what you wanted to talk about? Beautiful. Take it away.
That's because I wanted to rebound on the fact that I felt a little bit imprisoned. What helped me to really open my chakras and think differently is sport. I love playing football like all the guys, but I'm not a sports guy. I was thriving in working, so I was spending, 10, 12 hours on my desk, and I loved it. And I was not like a sport guy. But then at some point, I tried to put in place some sports routine. And there are two sports that I really loved. It's freediving. So it's apnea. You have one breath and you go as deep as possible and you come back. And go-karting. And it's really fun because when I was young, I preferred collective
Wow.
games. And now I prefer solo sports because in solo sports, you disconnect. When I'm racing in a go-kart, it's impossible to think to something else than racing. When you are doing freediving in the middle of the sea, you don't have your phone. You're there for the whole day, and your only objective is to get relaxed, to enjoy your dive. And that's really what allowed me to feel less imprisoned, think of new ways of doing stuff, and have the energy as well, to do it, because I could have stayed in my previous company, make it grow, sell it 5-10 times what I'm selling it now. But again, it's not what I liked to do. So be honest with yourself. This is for all the listeners. Try to be honest and lucid with yourself. What do you like? What you don't like? If you have something that scratches you on the back of your head, there is a problem. So trust this little scratching on the back of your head.
That is so beautiful. I love your two choices. They couldn't be any more different. They're both solo, but they are very different. And I watched this movie about freediving. Perhaps you've seen it.
Yeah, the one on Netflix with the girls and the guy.
That's right. That's right. Breathing Deep, I think it's called. Or
Yeah,
in any case, we'll put it in the show notes. But it's fascinating sport, and you certainly do have to be in shape. But it's really much more. It's a very strong mental game, and
it's a
driving is a
mental
very
game.
strong mental game. But you're using it as a meditative practice, it seems, to kind of
Exactly,
clear your
exactly.
mind and to get closer. Like tell us about that, like how you came to that, and like what you feel before and after, and some of the benefits.
It's amazing feeling. First, I love things that are kind of outside the box. And when you think of sports and competitive sports, you think that you have to give it all. And freediving is exactly the opposite. Your objective is not to be as fast as possible, to go as deep as possible, even though that's the metric. It's to be as relaxed as possible so that you can go far. You often say when you're on the highway and you have like I don't know 50 kilometers of gasoline, you don't drive at 160. You drive at 50, 70 to make sure you can get there. And so it's the same in freediving. You have to slow yourself down to be able to perform. Then that's kind of the mindset that you need to have. Then in regards of the sports by itself, like I was saying, when you spend 1 day or 3 days in a row in the ocean, you don't have all these electromagnetic waves that distract you. And when you dive, often people, they say, oh my god, it's scary, how can you go? My personal record is at 42 meters deep. And they're like, oh my god,
Wow.
how can you go to 42 meters? And I'm like, but it's a gradual sport. I don't go at 42 meters like that. I go at 10, I go at 20, I go at 25, I go at 28.
So how much time down is that to go down and back 42 meters?
A little bit less than 2 minutes.
But wow, that's impossible for me. Like I would never be able to hold my breath and go that deep. But that's a
Honestly, I'm sure in half a day I can help you get to 2 minutes. It's in the mind and it's about relaxing. And then there is a couple of tricks, but they are quite simple. The real threshold is when you go above 40, when you start to go above 40, because then there's really a lot of pressure. I mean, even the feeling of diving is amazing. You're going down, you have the water that is caressing your skin. As you go down, you have the pressure that is literally hugging you. So you feel like in back in the belly of your mother. Like it's so uniform, it's so everywhere. I'm sure there are some dopamines or hormones that gets out of this, because the feeling is amazing. And then there is the fact that you hold your breath. People think they can hold your breath 30 seconds, but actually in 30 seconds, it's your muscle memory that wants you to breathe. And when you stay 2 minutes, 3 minutes with by doing exercise, because when you go down, you have to palm, and when you go up, you have to palm again. You get out the water and you're very euphoric. It's like you're a little bit high because you pushed yourself without being too violent, and your body just loved it.
beautiful. It's almost like there's so many parallels. Entrepreneurship, right? If you think the pressure is crushing you and giving you pain, then it is. But if you think the pressure is hugging you and you're back in the womb, then it also is. So it's the same thing. When you said you wake up and you eat problems for breakfast as an entrepreneur, and at a certain point you're like, that's delicious, I need more. The pressure is hugging me, and oh, I need to relax. I don't need to be frantic and crazy. I need to be like, okay, next problem, good. And then at
Just
the
do it.
end of the day you can feel like you are on the top of the world because you're almost high from all of the, adrenaline from just
The accomplishments.
moving forward. Yes.
No, definitely.
Wow.
I join you. I wish that to everyone. Find your sport. Obviously, I'm a little bit biased, but try freediving. It's for entrepreneurs that feels that they're not able to disconnect. It's really amazing, and it comes back to why PyratzLab. I love the. I think first the piracy laws are very close to the Web3 laws in the sense that they were like fair. Everybody, all the value that was created was fairly redistributed among the crew members. That's what Web3 stands for, basically. And I think piracy is a big parallelism to entrepreneurship. When you're an entrepreneur,
Decentralized as well too, not a yes.
Yeah, exactly, decentralized.
Distributed.
When you're an entrepreneur, you don't know where you're going. It's the adventure. Every day is a new day that you don't expect what's coming on. It's the same when you take the sea. There is all this excitement of the adventure, but nothing is going to be easy. And piracy. People think of pirates as bad people, maybe previous generations, but our generation grew up with pirates like One Piece, and they are good guys. They're doing the good thing. They try to federate people. They try to be free. And I think that's what it's all about. Find your freedom. It's different for everyone.
Wow. What a great point to close it out. Ladies and gentlemen, Captain Jack Bilal El Alamy Sparrow from PyratzLabs. Who doesn't love that guy? Johnny Depp's going to play you in the Netflix series about all the stuff
you
that
already
you
compared
do.
me to Yacht, so come on.
Yacht, Johnny Depp. How about Keanu Reeves? There's another one. There's three awesome people. So, wow, thank you so much for...
No, thank you for the invite, Rich. It was a pleasure to exchange and humbly share a little bit of what I think are good practices.
Open seas, exotic isles, and buried treasure. Arr! Thank you very much. Thanks so much. And please comment, like, and subscribe and join the...
And reach out on LinkedIn, on Twitter.
Reach out to Bilal and join the Pirate Army. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rich. Bye-bye, everyone.
This podcast is for information purposes only and should not be considered as financial advice. Any opinions provided in this podcast reflect the views of the speakers only.